This show is brought to you by PMP Nutrition and Supplements.com, your one-stop shop for fitness and supplements to get you to your best life. The Jacksonville Free Press, providing quality urban news for more than 30 years. And Edward Waters College, preserving history, promising futures. From the campus of Edward Waters College, it's the Rahman Experience. The Rahman Experience.
It's a brand new experience, a brand new time, a brand new way to do it. Hey, yeah, it's all mine. I'm the one telling stories you thought couldn't be told. I'm the one that bring you in your when you shaking from the cold. I'm the one always out front, yeah, trying something new. I'm the one that's gonna deliver when they ask what it do. Politics, entertainment, a science, all the news. Keeping you on the level with the stuff you can use. DJ Kids on the beat, the Rock's got the track. It's the Rahman Experience. You know that's where it's at.
Welcome to the Rahman Experience. I'm Rahman Johnson, and it's a special show this week because everything I had planned for the show is gone. That's because I found out that Winnie Mandela had passed away at 81 years old. Now, we knew that she was in the hospital, but Winnie has had a profound effect not only on my life, but on the life of the world. She was currently a member of parliament representing the African National Congress, but she was more than that. She was a symbol of freedom and light, and just a woman who didn't hold elected office until later in her life, but continued to be a vision of what the struggle was and what it could be. Just a beautiful woman, and we'll talk about her today with two people who didn't know her but were affected by her. One grew up in Zambia, and the other was back and forth between the United States and Ghana. That's David Simfukwe, and a return to the Rahman Experience, Professor Effie Durbin. Now, remember, you can always connect with the experience on social media, on Twitter at RahmanJ, Instagram at RahmanJ, or you can call in at 540-RAHMAN-7. That's 540-RAHMAN-7. Leave your messages. Keep them to about 30 to 45 seconds. I want to know what you're thinking so we can reflect you in our show. And finally, you can find me on Facebook at RahmanJFans. Now, I won't share any of the messages you left this week, and thank you for keeping them coming. Because of the way the show is moving this week, I'm proud to announce that we are now on iHeartRadio. So you can find us on your iHeartRadio app. Just put in the Rahman Experience. Now, we're still on Spreaker, still on iTunes, and of course, Spotify. So make sure that you comment about the show, share the show with your friends, and keep listening. There'll be more to come, but first, the news. With the gun debate center stage, one social media giant is at the center of the latest shooting in America. On Tuesday afternoon, the California headquarters for YouTube was the site of a shooting that left 4 dead, including the alleged shooter. Now, authorities are still investigating the shooting, but they say the woman, 39-year-old Nasim Agdam, is responsible for the shooting. They say she may have had a vendetta against YouTube because she believed they were stopping views of her video. Authorities are still investigating. A company that was founded by a 19-year-old Stanford University dropout and was once worth more than $9 billion is at the center of a fraud controversy. Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes had a years-long Ponzi-like scheme going where the company exaggerated claims and created false financials to the tune of $700 million, according to the FBI. Now, the company claimed to create cheaper, more efficient medical testing. One of the reasons that the company was able to secure so much funding is that they had board members like Defense Secretary James Mattis, former Secretary of State Warren Schultz, and Fox Chairman Rupert Murdoch. Sources claim the tests are not accurate or reliable. The White House is under fire this week for releasing a photo of its new class of interns. Now, many say the photo was nice, but one thing was missing: no color. Now, the picture itself, of course, was in color, but out of the 91 interns in the photo, only 2 of them were not white. Now, those 2 were placed on the ends of the photo, and people said that's a bit strange. Now, the White House has not yet commented on the lack of diversity in its newest intern class. Tracy Morgan is back, even though he says he's never been anywhere. He's joined by Cedric the Entertainer and Tiffany Haddish on the brand new TBS series, The Last OG. Now, the show is produced and was created by Tracy Morgan and Academy Award winner Jordan Peele. They take a look at a released former drug dealer who's trying to make his way back into society. The show is getting some really great reviews, and the trailer itself, it's amazingly funny. Now, it airs Tuesday nights at 10 on TBS. The Rahman Experience continues in just moments. We'll be right back.
Donna from Louisiana. the storm just hit, and we went from donating to the food bank to needing it.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome to the Rahman Experience.
Thanks again for joining the show this week. And as I told you earlier, the show is all about Winnie Mandela. Winnie is known as Mama Winnie, Mama Africa, so many names, and her life can't be contained in one show, but I'll do my best. Anyway, before we get deeper into the conversation with two people who are connected to Mrs. Mandela by their birth, let's take a look at the timeline of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. She was called the most loved, feared, and exalted woman in modern African history.
We are going to dismantle apartheid.
Regardless of the emotions, she was known as the mother of the movement.
The white man has the audacity. He is 3.5 million. We are 30 million.
For all that she did and all that she went through, here's a look back at the life of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. She was born September 26, 1936, as Nomzamo Winifred Zaniwe Madikizela in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. Her tribal name in Xhosa means she who tries. Mandela earned degrees in social work and international relations and became South Africa's first black social worker. At only 22 years old, she met and married an anti-apartheid lawyer for the African National Congress who was 16 years her senior. That lawyer was Nelson Mandela.
Comrade Winnie was part and parcel of that collective. It would be a mistake, however much brave she was, and nobody can deny that. However much she suffered, nobody can deny that.
They married in 1955 and had 2 daughters. Now, just 4 years after they married, her husband was thrown in jail for his work and would remain there for the next 30 years.
Our policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word apartheid. And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily, and perhaps much better, be described as a policy of good neighborliness.
While in jail, Mandela became a leading crusader for her husband's cause and worked to abolish apartheid in South Africa. Even through attempts on her life, the burning down of her house, and imprisonment, Mandela continued to fight for what she believed in.
My husband has been fighting for the liberation of the African people, for the working harmoniously of all the racial groups in this country.
Under the government of South African President F.W. de Klerk, Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990.
In pursuance of my opening address to Parliament, I am now in a position to announce that Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster prison on Sunday, the 11th of February, at about 3 p.m.
Later, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission was formed, and free and fair elections were held. Nelson Mandela became the first black South African fairly elected president in 1994. Although Winnie Mandela was by his side when he left prison in 1990 and she worked with him during the elections, they divorced in 1996. She was appointed a deputy minister in the new government, but was removed after corruption charges just 11 months later.
In my capacity as deputy minister, in the circumstances, whilst still Deputy Minister of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, I publicly resign from that office to pay attention to the more pressing issues I have set out here above.
Her legal troubles didn't end there. She was convicted of torture, murder, and abduction, but her sentence was reduced and she received a suspended sentence. She returned to politics in 2007 and became a respected elder member of parliament.
Thank you, darling. I never knew I meant so much to you. But I had to keep pinching myself to find out whether I'm really still alive. And you know how I am itching to contribute to the state of the nation. Amandla!
A position she held until her death in April 2018. So we are talking about the death of Winnie Madikizela Mandela. And Winnie Mandela is really a citizen of the world. And, you know, I've spent the last few days trying to blow apart this show to really talk about what she brought to the world. And to really discuss it, is my friend David Simfrukwe, who is also the Director of Internet Technology and Information Technology for Edward Waters College, and a returning guest to the Rahman Experience, Professor Alvania Durbin. And the reason I wanted both of you to come is because both of you have different, varied perspectives. David, you're from Southern Africa, not specifically South Africa, but a neighboring country in Southern Africa. And Professor Durbin, you are a first-generation Ghanaian American. So you had the opportunity to go back and forth to Ghana as you came up in the world. And so my question for you is, Winnie Mandela's influence is still felt here in the United States. What does it mean? Like, now we look back 81 years. I looked at her 80th birthday speech. I've been doing research about Mama Winnie, as everyone who I've spoken with, and it was really hard to get someone in South Africa because they're mourning right now. As we talk about Mama Winnie and what she brought to the table, David, I'll start with you. Tell me about the influence that you saw from her in your country growing up, and you had the opportunity to meet her as a student at Edward Waters College when she visited.
It's very hard to quantify Mama Winnie's influence. Those days when I was growing up, we had quite a few freedom fighters from Zimbabwe back then, Southern Rhodesia, and South Africa. People like Oliver Tambo, who were actually based in Zambia. They had to run away from South Africa, to save their lives for really. Winnie Mandela was one of the few people who stayed within South Africa and put up with with all the harassment that the political system put on the freedom fighters. And she's a great example of the strength and the ability and the will to face to stand strong in the face of affliction. And so she is a great example for most of us, and an inspiration for the most part. Because up to her death, she was still fighting for the common person. And was a
seated member of parliament in South Africa.
Exactly.
And they took refuge in your country, in Zimbabwe.
Zambia. I'm from
Zambia. But were they in Zambia or Zimbabwe?
No.
Some of the ANC members.
Remember, Zimbabwe did not become independent until 1980.
Right. So they were still. This is before.
So those up until that time, for the most part. People from before Angola even became independent.
They were still colonized. Yeah.
I think it was 75. Zimbabwe, obviously, 1980s. South Africa, even much longer. They were, the freedom fighters were actually, based in Zambia.
Wow.
And a good number of them. They were all over.
Because you were in a free community.
Obviously, Zambia. Obtained its independence in 1964.
Now, Professor Durbin, and obviously as we look back on the life of Winnie Mandela and what she brought to the table, you have a different vantage because you, unlike David, grew up in the United States. So seeing what you did from her, how did her being who she was, how did it affect you? And you have a special connection. You were telling me, I didn't realize earlier, about your sorority.
My family is from Ghana, West Africa, as you've mentioned. So when there was a struggle in another country, we all were there. One of the first plays I ever saw was Sarafina.
Yes.
Sarafina, which is about the struggle of South Africa's apartheid. And I'm in high school. We're watching Different World, and we're learning about apartheid, and we're going to plays, and, we're like, what does divest mean? And then we start to learn about who Nelson Mandela was and who Winnie Mandela was, and he's in jail for what? Wait a minute, Then it became real. My parents have been talking about it, but when you have outsiders who aren't African, for the lack of a better way of saying it, care about another country so far removed from their everyday experiences, it became larger than life. And then to have this strong black woman, she wasn't just Nelson Mandela's wife, she was a leader in her own right.
Because he was locked up.
Yeah. So she was continuing his fight, but with her rule. I mean, if I can say it that way.
Yeah.
And I just thought she was everything. Like, to have someone so powerful. Even earlier, you and I were discussing about her checkered past.
Flaws.
Yeah. As we all have.
Yeah.
We make the choices with the information we have at the time. Are they always right? No. But we learn from them and grow from them. We were discussing that, hey, I wonder if she would have been called on a lot of those things had she been male. Mm-hmm. Because, again, we see so many people who have done such far worse crimes.
We can go
far worse crimes and
Good Luck Jonathan. We can go to Robert Mugabe. We can go down the list of African leaders. Yeah,
name it. And they are never called to the carpet. And not saying that she should not have been. However, it does not diminish or eradicate any of the great works that she has done. Yeah. We revel in her. And yes, she is an honorary member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She was inducted in 1987 in absentia. She could not
travel.
Yeah, she could not travel.
Yeah.
But she was inducted, and she was recognized for being a single parent because, again, her
husband was gone. Yeah,
was not available. So she was a freedom fighter and raising the children in an oppressive society. Like, that was huge. That is what we're about. How do you still serve your community when the service is detrimental of all things to you?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
So I'm honored, and Delta sent out a letter to all of the members letting everybody know, hey,
she's one of us.
She's one of us.
Yeah.
For those of you who didn't know, she's one of us.
Yeah.
And
which is huge for Delta back then, because in 1987, when South Africa was still under apartheid rule, I reached out earlier today to Randall Robinson. I don't know if you guys remember him, brother of Max Robinson, founder of Trans Africa. And I remember as a kid, Randall Robinson did a hunger strike about America divesting in apartheid South Africa. And there were so many of those people who were around that organizations did not want to be a part of anything to do with South Africa because they didn't want to get like CIA, FBI blacklisted or whatever.
Right.
So Delta stepped out to do that. So
never even heard the word divested divest before apartheid.
Yeah.
Because I've only ever heard the word invest. Like, who takes their money away? What does that mean?
Yeah.
But that was one of the first times I understood what a black dollar could do.
Yes.
That was one of the first times when I realized that we didn't have to always be marching what kind of economic power we had. Oh, this is what we can do?
Let's do it.
Let's do that.
David, I got to ask, you had an opportunity to meet Mama Winnie. Was when she came to Edward Waters College, and I remember it vividly, what did you remember? You were a student here. I was not. I was in junior high school, I think, at the time. But you were here as a student. You had a better connection to her because you both were from Africa, same continent. What was the mood like of students when Winnie Mandela came on campus? What were they?
What year was that?
Actually, I think I just graduated.
You just graduated?
Yes, because that's about the time they were getting ready to
release him,
Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
And so she came right before that time. I think it was about 91, 92, something like that.
Okay. No, it should have been the late 80s.
Late 80s?
Late 80s.
Late 80s when she
would have become here, because I was doing some research, and I didn't realize, first of all, if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
I was doing some research on this to give the full picture of both Mama Winnie as well as Papa Nelson. That's what we're going to call him, Mama Winnie. Okay. And I didn't realize how vehemently people opposed Mandela, period.
Oh, yeah.
There were these videos, there's just these vitriolic videos of people calling him a terrorist, people calling him, today, not wanting his monument up. This man who won a Nobel Peace Prize for saying, I just want everybody to have racial equality. They said he is a monster and they don't want any monuments for him. People today.
Well, remember that even when he had to come here, they had to do a special visa because under U.S. guidelines, he was still a terrorist.
Yeah.
And he was on the terrorist watch list. I saw that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Which is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that, those in power, this is how you keep yourselves in power, by keeping people in fear, in a state of fear. What could he have done? To think that he could have used his manifesto, which was about freedom, and not, to go out and kill everybody. Because again, the word manifesto has been associated with these Unabombers and serial killers and you name it. But his was about freedom for all, equality for all. To place that under a terrorist banner, that was someone who wanted to keep their privilege. That was someone who wanted to keep the symbolism of a man who wanted... Sorry, let me backtrack so that I can be transparent. This was somebody who wanted to keep the symbolism of a powerful black man who did it without violence to move a nation. That it didn't just happen in America, it can happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. That symbolism had to be quashed.
That's a lot, because you're right, and they want the symbolism even today, where this woman who, up until the day she died, it was a symbol of we can. It's possible. Yeah, why? And I mean, as I was doing research, people said she was not only feared, but respected, and in some cases deified.
Yeah.
For her to be convicted of all that she was, and then come back in 2007 and as a part of the ANC be elevated to a member of parliament. And we saw her with Gracia Michel when President Mandela passed away.
Yes.
That was her mourning sister. They were sisters in mourning on the same platform, sitting next to each other.
Because, listen, and if I can just add into that, for those of you who don't understand about... And I hope I'm not misspeaking, misrepresenting the entire continent. So I'm going to speak for my family. But in the African culture, there is no, I can't stand her. And even if that is what the case is between the ex-wife, the current wife, the ex-wife, that's not what you do within the family. You hold your tongue. You are civil. You are there to raise children. You are there to be a helpmate. This is what you do. We're not going to get in front of the whole wide world and do a reality TV show. You'll never know if they hated each other. You'll never know. There'll never be a biopic. There'll never be a book that says that they hate each other. You're not going to find out. You won't know. The only people who will know are those people who had intimate knowledge of their different relationships. We just don't do it.
And I think the biggest thing to keep in mind, I think, with especially from Winnie Mandela's standpoint, she still had a bigger fight.
Right.
Winnie Mandela, up to her death, was really more concerned about the poor person.
Right.
If you look at her relationship with the ANC, towards the end of her life, there's a splinter group that broke away from the ANC. The ANC called I think it's EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters. Mm-hmm. Those were pretty much the
younger ones,
the newer progressive.
It's like SNCC and NAACP and stuff like that.
Yes, they actually represent what the ANC was when
initially.
Winnie was, young in her youth. When Nelson, was arrested. That's pretty much what they represent, and if you listen to, to what their rhetoric to date, it has to do with, economic freedom in this lifetime.
Right.
The ANC, for whatever reason, I guess it had to work ways to try to figure out to make this new South Africa work. Part of they adopted a land distribution system which called willing buyer, willing seller, willing buyer.
Okay.
Something like we're going to try to buy the land, but the seller has to be willing in order to sell. The people on the land have to be willing to sell.
Okay.
Obviously, that has not worked out.
Of course not.
People don't want to sell their land. So
they're not operating eminent domain the way they do here.
Yeah. So freedom, economic emancipation from a freedom standpoint. From an economic standpoint, has been real slow. If at all existent,
right.
For black people in South Africa, and that's really, I think, I can confidently say was Winnie Mandela's Winnie's biggest disappointment to this date, because I mean, I think everybody knows that. Can see that, the plight of a black person in South Africa is still, there for anybody to see.
Right.
That they haven't risen, even
they
though
haven't risen at all.
They can theoretically go in.
Anywhere.
Don't have to be in Soweto. They can literally go to Sun City, for that matter, and buy a
Now,
house.
you have,
but can you afford it?
You have quite a few South Africans who are doing. A good number of them are doing well.
You have the rich kids of South Africa. Have you seen the TV show?
But they want to build their township.
Yeah.
They want to build that one.
Yeah.
But the majority of black South Africans, they are really, they are not where she envisioned South Africa would be at this stage.
And I would argue that many of our leaders, any of the freedom fighters from the civil rights era to now, they all go to their graves not having achieved what they specifically wanted to do, and thinking where their people should be. Dr. King's last fight was not about equality, but now he's getting ready to go into economics, into job rights. And he went to his grave not having achieved that while he was alive. And here she has, it's 2018. She's gone to her grave not having achieved, or, her perception of not having achieved this economic balance for her country. There's always work that's left to be done.
It's very interesting you mentioned about diversification. I was listening to a speech last night by Martin Luther King to the, I believe it was in Memphis. It must have been actually his last speech when he was talking about the sanitation workers.
Yes, that's right.
And
the sanitation workers, right.
Yeah.
And he brought up that very point in terms of, the economic power of the black community, and in reference to the U.S. And we are talking about the power of the economic power of black people being more than any country except up to 8 countries in name, like Great Britain, West Germany, France, to name a few. But the collective, in terms of what we can do if we wanted to, we can put pressure on anybody and on anything and get things done our way, because we have that economic power. Now we're talking about 1965, and this translated to what you just referred to back in the late 80s, when we're talking about diversifying diversification out of South Africa,
right?
Or divesting, rather, not diversification. I'm sorry, divesting out of South Africa. So it's just amazing how the story from back then was relevant 20 years ago is still relevant today,
which is sad. It's
sad.
It
is sad,
but it is interesting.
Sad, but it's very interesting to know that we still hold, the key for change.
We always hold it, but it is all in what we do with our black dollars. How we, our purchasing power, our economic power. Yes, we have challenges economically, but you're right. As a population, we can stop a lot of things. Little Rihanna.
Snapchat stock drop.
Stock drop.
Snapchat, when she pulled off, when she said what Snapchat had, you saw the ad with Chris Brown, and it was really inappropriate.
Very inappropriate.
And Snapchat put this ad out about, I'm not even going to go into it.
Anyway, but my point is that.
But their stock dropped when Rihanna was like, really, y'all? This what you're going to do? Stock
Look how fast when you just in one move, how much money that man lost. How much money? Not to mention all of the investors who are from Snapchat to Facebook to whatever other platforms he has a finger in, because I believe he's touched almost everything. We have power. People need to believe in that power. You're absolutely right. Coke, Pepsi, any of the Pepsi and Coke subsidiaries who were in South Africa in the early 90s when we were asking people to divest, once it became public knowledge, here in America, because we didn't even know that. What do you mean? We've had civil rights for years. How is it that this another country in Africa and they have no rights. What was happening?
And mine was, I remember Shell and BP. Like, even for years
The gas
afterward,
companies, yeah.
they were like, I couldn't buy gas at Shell because I was afraid that, I remember my family, because we were very active,
right,
them saying you can't buy gas at Shell because they support apartheid and whatever.
Man,
let me ask you this question.
Rappers jumped in. They said they did whole songs about not going to buy from what was it, Shell or
Shell and BP,
some Coke, Sunoco, or they did a whole.
Let me ask you this: why didn't and as we remember, obviously here to celebrate the life and legacy of Winnie Mandela, why is it that Ellen Johnson Sirleaf did not receive, even though she was acclaimed and she was the only female elected leader on the continent, why did she not get the same acclaim as Winnie Mandela?
In terms of...
Oh, no, those are just two totally different...
Well, some say that, but she's... why didn't she get acclaim? And not to compare them, but is it...
It's... I mean, those are... I mean, they're just two totally different situations because, I mean, she was elected president. She's the only female elected president in Africa. Ever elected president in Africa. So,
I know it's a difficult one when I look to juxtapose it because obviously in Liberia you didn't have the same struggle that they did in South Africa. Winnie Mandela didn't get elected to any office until 2007, right? She was a minister, but
not
she
wanted to run.
No, but she never was elected to office. She was, which I didn't realize, again, as much research as I've done, 16 years, President Mandela's junior.
Very young.
She was a social worker, and she wanted to see better. And it's funny, as I looked back over the videos of her life, she was actually demure. Her initial videos, and then later there's this dragon that came out.
And I would say I would submit that came after the torture because you see it, but you don't think it's going to happen to you. When it happens to you, it changes something in you.
She really, she suffered a lot.
Yeah,
because remember she was also what do you call that person? She was granted persona non grata.
Persona non grata.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like your own people don't want you. Your own country doesn't want you. Your only country doesn't want you. So. And
kicked out the country, that you fought for.
She was, arrested. I don't know how many times. She was
beaten,
tortured. They were forced to live in certain parts of the country. It's almost like a concentration camp, if you would.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So I mean, that kind of life will will have it. Will have hardened you. Will change you, and I think for me that's where I sympathize a lot with her, in terms of all these things that happened around her. Now, as a leader, obviously, the buck stops with you. Ultimately, as a leader, the buck stops with you. But it's hard to imagine that she would be in total control of all those situations.
Yeah,
every facet. It's
of
not
every facet
possible.
of her life. Although she's still, I understand
she's
that she's responsible
is.
Ultimately when it's all said and done, because it's her name that was carrying that struggle forward.
Yeah.
And it was all centered around her.
I mean, even until last year, did you see? I didn't realize she was in a legal battle for President Mandela's ancestral home until like 2016.
Well, I didn't even realize.
Yeah, there was still other stuff going on. But last year she celebrated 80, and she came out on her 80th birthday, and they had a fabulous affair in South Africa. And she spoke, and I could tell she was weaker than usual.
She was fighting illness.
She was a little slower, but at the end of her speech,
she's been sick a while. I know it said from the beginning of the year, but she's been sick.
Before that, because you could hear it, and she moved a little slower. But at the end of the speech, when she turned 80, she raised her fist and she said, "Amandla!" And she said it with such fierce power that the entire audience said, "Awetu!"
Right.
And I used to love that Amandla Awetu chant that they would say in South Africa. But it was like this dragon had returned, if only for just a moment. Because she said it with such fierceness.
I made her whole speech to get to that.
To get to that point, yeah.
Yes.
How will we remember the life and legacy of Winnie Mandela?
Well, if I can offer this, I will say to anyone who are listening, do your own research. You know, the same way that we revere Che Guevara here, there are those who don't, who are native to his country and said he started one way and became another. Castro, those who loved him, he was one way and then he became another. And not to compare her to them, but just in terms of listen to who you're speaking with, do your own research, come to your own conclusion. When I remember her, I'm always going to remember a mother who was forced to adopt a nation.
How will you remember David Winnie Mandela?
The biggest thing is one of you just mentioned that she was a social worker.
Yeah,
that's very and that's the biggest thing I remember about Mama Winnie. She was a social worker from beginning to
the end. Yeah,
because her concern was the plight of the poor man. That was the biggest concern from beginning to end. Whatever her struggles were.
Right.
What always came through for me was that she was always concerned about the plight of the poor man.
Right.
I just as we think back on her, I'm just excited. And I remember the times, and she was really beautiful.
Oh yeah. Yes.
She was when I think of Makeba, and
Miriam
Miriam Makeba, the singer, and I almost wanted to hear Mama Winnie sing something because she was so pretty, and I'm like, I wonder can she sing? That was one of my
let's not challenge that.
But she was just as beautiful. I mean, even into like these gelés that she would wear, and let's call it what it is. Mama's gone now, but those wigs, she had all kind of wigs that she would wear. She was like a beautiful woman. I saw her wedding picture, which I had never seen before, and doing research, she was a beautiful bride. I remember her, and I have to say, there were some flaws, but
as we all are.
We're all flawed. And one of the pieces that I share with everyone is that when she resigned, she was appointed in 1994. 11 months later is when she resigned, when the president said you got to go, which I'm sure was hard for him as his ex-wife and the woman who was there writing him every day while you're in jail suffering from tuberculosis and God knows what else. And she said, for the good of the country,
right,
I'm stepping aside, not knowing what it would be, but she smiled and she says, I have to do this because it's right. And she kind of punched a couple times at the government. And she talked about corruption. She talked about...
I've been trying to get that speech for my students. It's not anywhere.
Her resignation speech?
No, there was another speech. And I wish I could remember the name of it. There was another speech before her resignation, but I can't find either one, actually. And if you can find it, great.
It's on here. It's on the show.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I need it transcribed is what I need.
Gotcha. We'll work on that.
She was a powerful speaker. A powerful speaker, and again, in her own right. I've never seen somebody step out of the shadow of a man who cast such a great shadow, and be her own person. We think about the wives of other leaders, Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz. While they quietly did their own thing, Winnie Mandela was loud and boisterous with it. And unapologetic, and I loved it for her. I loved it. She was an advocate for her people.
The funny thing, they were both very, they had a great sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like you just said, I mean, it's just rare to have a couple that both are so powerful in terms of their delivery, their stage command, their presence on stage. So
and funny.
And very funny.
Is that a South? And before we go, is that a South African thing?
No, I think
because David, you're hella funny, right? And the reason I bring it up is
I think it's just a gift, it's a blessing for them.
Because you're all I've known you for 20 plus years. I've never seen you sad or everything's always happy.
I do get sad. I was sad yesterday when I heard about
Mama Winnie.
Too, yeah.
I celebrated. I was a little bit. I said it caught me off guard, and then I was like, this woman changed the world.
Because funny thing is like I sit there from time to time and just watch different, speeches.
Right.
Her speeches. Nelson Mandela. Like I was talking about. MLK.
Yeah.
I just sit there and I mean, it's just inspiration, and she is one of those that, I guess now I have to stick with Barack and Michelle Obama.
Yeah.
But they are funny though. These guys, they
Desmond Tutu.
It's very funny.
He start off with a laugh.
This dude, he's about 2'1".
Don't forget
dude
that.
Is remember when he came when he did the event in Jacksonville? And so we were together like for a whole day, and my jaws were hurting by the end of the day. He told jokes about, and he's like this little tiny man that brought peace. And he told jokes about everything. Like, the sun is shining. The sun, it's shining. Like, it was, everything was amazing to him. And I think when you get south of the equator, I don't know what it is about South Africa. Think about the sun. Nothing about Ghana. But it's like they start singing and all the clothes is in different colors and you see beads and they're like, the sun, and they're just shining.
But music, I think, music
word.
is always a big part of societies that struggle. For Black Americans, it's the same thing when you look at Black South Africans. Look at that.
Our songs, though, were a little more, from what I have been shared, has been shared with me, the songs of African American struggle were more
somber.
It's very somber, very dirgish.
Well, even them, they had those songs. Now they are more joyous. They are most joyous, but I think most of the songs are still rooted in
in the struggle,
the desire to be free, the struggle. The struggle.
Remember the toy, the dance, the toy in South Africa. They were dancing. They were like, "Yeah, we oppressed, but we still can party."
Well, everybody can do that.
But
it's probably more the celebration of what could happen.
Yeah.
The prospect of what they can happen, the faith that is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's what you're celebrating.
It's a very good faith.
Knowing that music is supposed to bring us joy is what we should have been doing. But I think they both have a stance and a reason in our histories and in our cultures. Mm-hmm. But I would agree with you to a point, because again, when Serafina came, I thought it was going to be this sad song. I'm leaving, I'm singing freedom for South Africa. We singing and dancing, and I just wanted to be on stage, and I wanted to be Serafina, and she was everything for me. Wow. Not to mention Paul Simon when he brought the South African
Lady Smith, Black Mambazo.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
On that note, I thank you both. David Simfukwe from Edward Waters College, thank you for your contribution and taking us back. And Effie, Professor Alvania Durbin, thank you for remembering with us. And we will always keep a light on and remember the life and legacy of Winnie Mandela Mama Africa. Back in a moment as the Rahman Experience continues. Mondays are just like one of those days.
Back to work already?
Now, Pie 5 Pizza Company gives you Magic Monday. Just stop in and mention Magic Monday. And for a limited time only, for just $5.55. That's right, $5.55. Get your custom handcrafted pie just the way you like it. The toppings you want, more than 40. Your favorite crust. We've got 4, including gluten-free. And your pick of savory sauces. It's all for just $5.55 at participating locations only. Fun, fresh, fast, and sprinkled with a little bit of magic. It's Pie 5. As the Rahman Experience continues, one of my favorite parts of the show is called Your Best Life. The reason I like it is because, for those that don't know the story, when I was on the air as a news anchor every day, I wanted to find a way to leave everybody with a bit of positivity. There was always murder, death, kill, bombing. But at the end of the day, we didn't leave anything good. And even though I'm still a news guy and the story must be told, I am a storyteller, right? I've acted and continue to act. I've done television, movies, film, and of course, the news. And regardless of the platform that I choose, I know that there is, kind of like the Pandora's box story, always hope at the bottom of the box. And in some ways, Your Best Life is a way to leave you with hope. So in tonight's Your Best Life, a woman who had hope all her own, Winnie Mandela, in her own words.
I have never really been that vain to acknowledge those sorts of things. I don't know where the story begins. I am not one of those who had an opportunity to plan and say to myself, today I have woken up and this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do. In the South African situation, I think there were very few mothers who had that opportunity during those times to plan anything. Our lives were determined by the political situation of the country at the time. And we led a day-to-day kind of life which was determined more by who you were fighting against than yourself. I never had that opportunity of saying to myself, today I'll take my children to school, I will perform the normal wifely duties. There never was such a time. From the onset, I need to point out that I was the most unmarried married woman. Even though I was supposed to be married, have a family, I've never really known what it is to have a married family life, a normal life, with a normal nucleus of a family where there's a father, a mother, and children waking up and having a breakfast together, and then you hold your children by their little arms and you take them to school. I've never seen any of my children on their first day at school. I was banned and prohibited from entering educational institutions, so I relied a great deal on friends to do the sorts of normal things a mother does. You know, I think we fought so hard, so ferociously for our freedom, that having attained that political freedom was so rewarding that I didn't even have an opportunity to get angry. I cannot pretend that during the years of struggle I was not angry. I was, of course, filled with rage, seeing my people dying all around me, particularly in 1976, which is one of the most tragic periods of our history. I was a young bride then, and I had never really lived as a married family woman with a normal life. So my life was always determined by the political situation of the time. I led a day-to-day existence which was determined by the security branch of the day. I never knew what I was going to wake up to. Those were very difficult times. Perhaps a person like myself would single out the banishment to Brantford, the separation with my children, and what the security branch did almost every time my children were coming back from boarding school. By the way, I had to place them in boarding schools at a very early age because of the problem of spending a lot of time in prison. I was arrested, I was in and out of prison almost every month, if not every week. And the consequence of that was the children were always left alone. So I had to farm them out to boarding schools at an extremely tender age. They were ironically in a school called Our Lady of Sorrows in Swaziland. I had to find them a place there. When they were not at Our Lady of Sorrows, my white mother, Helen Joseph, used to take the children whenever I got arrested and they were back from school and they found me in prison. So those were perhaps the cruelest moments which have left an indelible mark in my heart that is still a very sore point to this day. I had no opportunity to see them growing up. I had no opportunity to help them with their homework and see to how they were performing in school like an ordinary family. I think that was God's miracle. If I did not believe, if I was not a Christian, I don't think I would have survived that period of my life. The 18 months in solitary confinement was the third worst aspect of my life that was very difficult to live with, and it left scars nothing can heal. I was detained at the central prison, the female section. The day they came to get me, as they always did, that one was the most painful of all the imprisonment I had suffered. The children were tugging on my skirt, crying, "Mommy, don't go, Mommy, don't go." And the police were so ruthless. There must have been about 30 to 40 police who came to arrest me. This was at 3 a.m. in the morning. And the usual thing was you heard bangs all over the doors. They were kicking the doors. They kicked in the windows. And that noise alone still lives with me to this day. And the degree of anger with which one was arrested was beyond belief. Our particular interrogation, I was part of 22 of us who were detained. By the way, you have no idea whatsoever who else is detained. I thought I was alone in prison. And when they came to fetch me from the cell, I knew that I either had to survive fighting or I had to surrender. There were only two options. And in my particular case, I was picked up this day on a Monday. I had been in detention for almost a month then. I was taken to the headquarters of interrogation. It was called a compol. That is where people lost their lives. On the first day of my interrogation, you are sitting alone on the chair. You are with these interrogating officers. There were about 10 of them in my case. Some behind, others in front, on the sides. Firstly, the first week in prison, you can't swallow. It becomes difficult to even swallow a glass of water. You just develop this bitterness in your mouth, and you lose your person. You just become an object that belongs to them. So when they took me to the cell for interrogation to the police headquarters, and they started interrogation, I was interrogated for 7 days and 7 nights, non-stop, not what they subsequently did later on when they would take a detainee back to the cells and bring the detainee back. I was interrogated continuously for 7 days and 7 nights, and what was relieving at the time, the body has a way of dealing with extreme pain. I welcomed the moments when I fainted. The body took care of itself. When I couldn't take it anymore, after being tortured, like all of them, like all other detainees, I was tortured too, and I was urinating blood, and I couldn't even lift up my legs at the end of interrogation, because you get so swollen from lack of sleep and non-sleeping for 7 days and 7 nights, that I don't think there was anything that would be more cruel. So whatever happened thereafter, you sort of get numbed with pain. I think South Africa, like other revolutionary movements, has a tendency of consuming its heroes. I haven't seen the accolades we have been seeing today about a simple little girl who left the country for whatever reasons at the time, who is now welcomed, this Charlize. I would have loved to see that happening for a Helen Joseph, a Lillian Ngoyi, Florence Madomela. Some of them are actually unknown by this generation. The Miriam Sodindas, the Florence Mposhos, women who gave up their lives for the struggle. I think today I am actually loved that much by the so-called media and those sorts of people who have hang-ups about apartheid. I would throw in the towel. I quite enjoy the fact that I will always prick their consciences. I will always remind them of the painful past they want us to forget. I will always be that person who nags their consciences when they pretend everything is just fine. South Africa is free.
I don't know whether we can quantify with words or really put into any kind of expression all that Winnie Mandela went through. I mean, you heard it in her own words. She wasn't able to have a family or raise a family, but yet she found a way to fight for people who she didn't even know in some cases. And for her, finding that opportunity for gratitude, to forgive, to work hard, and even though she was a flawed person and was scarred by being tortured and hurt, she found another way to live her best life. And that's what our lives should be about. I mean, we don't have to go through the things that Winnie Mandela went through. We don't have to take a lot of those struggles, even though we do have struggles in our time and in our way. We don't have the same struggles that she had or that she went through and that she acknowledged. But what we can do is take the pain and turn it into power. Power of change, power to change our circumstances, whatever they are, power to empower other people, and power to create something new and different for our kids and for our families to sustain. So I'm thankful that Winnie Mandela showed us how to do it, how to live our best lives. Thank you, Mama Winnie. Well, that's it. Another Rahman experience for the record books. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. To Alvania Durbin and David Simfukwe. Thank you to Tierra Humphrey, Jada Renee, and everyone else to help to produce the show. You guys absolutely rock. Thanks so much. Don't forget you can follow us on social, and don't take no from somebody who doesn't have the authority to tell you yes. If no one's told you, I love you. Make the rest of the day absolutely amazing.
It's a brand new experience, a brand new time, a brand new way to do it. Hey, yeah, it's all mine. I'm the one telling stories you thought couldn't be told. I'm the one that bring you in when you shaking from the cold. I'm the one always out front, yeah, trying something new. I'm the one that's gonna deliver when they ask what it do. Politics, entertainment, and science, what it do. Keeping you on the level with the stuff you can use. DJ Kids on the beat, Rock's got the track. It's the Rahman experience, you know that's where it's at.